Welcome to Leading People with me, Jerry Murray. This episode of Leading People is brought to you by Wide Circle, helping you make better talent decisions. To learn more, visit widecircle.eu. That's WIDECIRCLE.eu. Leading People is a podcast which features insightful conversations with leading people about leading people. Yes, that's a play on words. In each episode, you get tips from leading people such as CEOs, HR professionals, authors, and thought leaders on all aspects of leading people, including how to attract, engage, develop, and grow talent to build successful organizations. And we provide insights on how to lead yourself so you can consistently perform at your best. Many people in the Western world can remember where they were on 9/11 when the airplanes hit the Twin Towers in New York. But can you remember where you were on the 22nd of March, 2016? My guest this week will never forget where she was on the morning of the 22nd of March, 2016. Karen Northshield was standing within meters of the first suicide bomber at Brussels Airport. Her life was changed in an instant. Today, she's rebuilding her life. She's written a book, and in this conversation, we'll share with you how to be more resilient. Karen Northshield, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jerry, for having me.
Great. It's lovely to see you. It's lovely to see you looking so good and smiling. It's you've been on a tough journey. For those people who don't know the story and who haven't met you yet, and maybe heard you or saw you on television, maybe you could just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and leading up to where you are today, and just share what you feel comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. So I am a fitness instructor, fitness coach. At least I was before a life-changing event took place now 5 years ago. And I was on 22 March 2016. I was at the International Airport of Brussels to catch a flight to visit relatives in the U.S. And without knowing it, I was actually standing just a few meters away from the first bomb that went off. And it was on that day there were the Brussels terrorist attacks. Obviously, I had no idea what was going to happen that morning, and I had no idea that my life would be literally changed around on that day. And it basically, so the bomb went off, and then from one instant to the next, I found myself fighting for my life, struggling to stay conscious, to remain conscious, struggling to remain alive. And from that second, it was literally a split second. It was a question of life or death, and I ended up being hospitalized for over 3.5 years. In the beginning, I was fighting countless infections, multiple infections. The doctors had told my family that I had basically zero chances of survival, and that survival state lasted for weeks and months. And the whole hospitalization issue lasted for 3.5 years, which brings me today, 5 years later, in a reconstructive phase, physically but also mentally. And I still consider myself as a coach, so it's my nature, coaching. Perhaps less in the fitness world, so less physically coaching, demonstrating with my body, but more perhaps mentally coaching or life coaching. So that's where I am today.
Okay, and we're going to start to unpack a lot of that a little bit later on in the conversation, because I know that you're really rebuilding and reorientating your life and combining. I think it's fair to say combining all that previous experience and the tragic experience you went through. I think a lot of people out there probably don't realize how what the impact of something like this is, not just, but I mean, I managed to see you, about a year afterwards, when you were just starting to get some movement back, and you'd been in a coma for quite some time, hadn't you? And when people hear we talk about infections, there's a lot more to it than just a blast, isn't there? I mean, maybe you can just explain. There's a lot more to this than just a bang. And
right. Well, obviously, I mean, it's. I'm trying to summarize what happened in 3.5 years, and just the first day itself alone, I could write a whole story on it. I could write a whole book on just the first story, the first hour, what happened during that first hour, what it is to survive, what it is to be literally, gasping for air, on the brink of death, and of being conscious that you're dying, literally. And it's very scary. It's very, very scary, and having nobody there to actually witness your death, not being able to say goodbye to your loved ones. It's a very, I would say, it's a state that I wish nobody to be in, really. And not having to deal with such a survival, with a reconstruction, with nobody should have to go through that. And it's just so much happened on every level. So I was basically at 30 years old. I was a young woman on a new career path. I was just became independent, so freelance in fitness and coaching. And so I was where I had always wanted to be, literally. And I had built myself up. It took me 30 years to finally be where I was meant to be, or so I thought.
Yeah. And just for our listeners, I mean, it's remarkable to see you today able to just I've seen part of what you went through, and as you say, none of us would ever want to go through it. None of us can even begin to imagine it, honestly. But I just want to say to our listeners that I knew you before this, and then we did a little bit of work together, and I watched you on that journey. I was I had my own little part in some of the stuff we did together in those days, and you truly stood out as somebody who had a passion for something, was going for it, and I rarely saw anybody so committed, and you really deserved that success you had achieved, and so I honestly, nobody should have to go through this, and especially not somebody like you who'd worked so hard for what you got, and that makes it even more poignant. But let's go to the book, because this is what I'd like to start to just let's maybe tell the listeners a little bit about the book, and what it did for you in writing it. I guess there was a certain part of your own healing to write this book and to express what happened. Yeah.
Trauma happens to somebody else, or in a different country, but never in your backyard, until it actually happens to you. You hear about wars, you hear about terrorist attacks in foreign countries, and countries that are at war, and you think that it's normal, actually, as long as it doesn't happen to you. Yeah. And so that made my story all the more interesting, because I had I came out alive of it, and I was literally fighting every day. And so writing the book, it took me a few months before I could actually bring my thoughts together. And it took me an additional few months, about 2 years after the attacks. I was still hospitalized at the point, before I actually started to accept the fact that what had happened to me, and accept the fact that maybe, okay, I should write my story. And that's when I took up pen and paper. And in the very beginning, I think it's important that the listeners know that I was not I had lost all of my abilities, so all of my autonomy, which means that I was bedridden. I had lost all my strength, all my mobility, and I could not even hold a pen in my hands. So I had dictated to somebody who wrote down the first pages, the first chapters, and that went on for about a year. And the abilities that we take for granted today, such as eating, drinking, digesting, sitting up, walking, I had to relearn. I had to relearn everything, starting from breathing and learning how to talk again. So I think that's just interesting to point out, because the book, actually the idea came from my immediate family and surroundings. And the first people to help me were actually my friends, because I was literally physically unable to write my thoughts on paper. So the book is actually a more of a is response to a demand of people saying, Karen, we want to know what happened. We want to know how you're able to overcome. And I had so many questions year after year after year on the day of the commemorations from the journalists, from people I didn't know, actually asking me questions. They're just so, they just wanted to know how it was possible and how I felt about it. So the book is actually an attempt to answer their questions. And then after that, I realized that it is, yes, therapeutic, because it allows me to structure my thoughts and to, quote unquote, bring some meaning to what happened. And I think that as long as you keep thoughts in your mind, it remains in a disruptive state, in a traumatized state. But the moment that you bring it out and you talk to a therapist about it, the moment that you bring it out and you put it on paper, then it takes form and it becomes concrete. Mm-hmm. And then you can structure your mind, and then you come to some kind of form of acceptance and some form of resilience. So that's how the book was first. That's how the book actually was born, and that's where we are today.
Okay, so that's a nice point for our listeners to then talk about resilience. And what you said a few minutes ago, I had to accept what had happened and to put some meaning on the whole thing. So perhaps maybe take us from that and explain a little bit. I mean, because I know you also then studied a lot of this stuff as part of that process, because I remember having conversations with you about, you were digging into the psychology and even neuroscience of all of this to try and understand it better. So maybe to share with our listeners a bit about what you've been learning, because I think they can read the book. Those who can read French or Dutch can already get a copy, and as you say, the English version is coming out. But maybe just share what were those factors that you started to realize about resilience.
Yep. So resilience for me is not just a physical element. It's not just physical strength. Obviously, it helps if you have the physical capacity, if you have bodily awareness, if you're an athlete, if you exercise on a regular basis, then that will have an effect on the mind, and it will help increase individual strength. But when I was in that state of victim state, when I was attached to machines, when I was held alive by machines, it was not my physical body that was helping me in any way, because my physical body was just literally it shredded into thousands of pieces, really. And the resilience actually started to take place in the mind. It's the mental capacity. So that's something that I learned about resilience. I think the origin, the definition is a physical term, meaning the physical capacity to after being stretched and pulled to come back to its original shape. But beyond that, in terms of survival, it's being able to keep fighting day after day after day, because there's a meaning to your existence. There's a meaning to why you are here. There's a meaning to why you survived. And that's what I understood. And today I understand resilience to be not just overcoming a trauma and being able to transform a trauma and to, quote unquote, live again. Because obviously life is not the same as before. The quality of life is not the same as before. I have multiple trauma. I have trauma that is, for the most part, invisible, but also is irreversible. So for my hearing, for example, I lost my hearing. I will not gain that back. So there's multiple trauma on different levels, and the quality of life is not the same. However, I still am here today. I have survived. And the resilience brings me to a different dimension, or to a different understanding, actually. And resilience for me is making the best of your circumstances. So obviously, I would have wished it never happened to me. Yeah. I would have preferred it never would have happened to my family as well, who were also traumatized and stood by my side the entire time. But I am here today, and I'm trying to make the most of what I do have and of who I am. And I choose to bring meaning to what happened to me. And this is something that's extremely difficult because in order to do that, you have to come to terms with what happened.
In the next part of our conversation, Karen links resilience to self-leadership. She goes on to explain how resilience is more a journey than a destination, and how we are responsible for our own journeys, despite what happens to us.
And it took me nearly 5 years to accept, and I'm not fully there yet. I'm still on that road. I'm still in the process of accepting and reconstruction and rehab. I'm still busy with that, but slowly, every day it's a daily process. I'm better understanding what resilience is, and for me, it's picking yourself back up, knowing that things are never going to be the same again, but making the best of your circumstances on a daily basis, and reinventing yourself. I think that's an important element because when trauma does happen, and it will happen on different levels to anybody, and it will happen when you least expect it. Right? A heart attack, or you're not expecting a heart attack, you're not prepared for it, and it happens.
No, I know that.
It's overcoming that challenge, that obstacle that life throws at you, and life literally throws it at you, right at your doorstep. You didn't ask for it, and the delivery's there. You have to do something with it. What are you going to do with it? And for me, that's resilience. It's accepting what happened, which is already it requires a lot of mental strength. And it's a challenge. It's really a little challenge. Yeah. And making something of it. It happened to you. It happened to me. What am I going to do with it? Yeah. For me, that's the underlying message, or at least that's the dimension that I'm getting to understand now of what resilience is, which is beyond the fact of overcoming trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the reasons I asked you on the program, because the concept of this program is, this podcast is leading people. However, in the opening episode, I said one of the most fundamental aspects of leading anybody is being able to lead yourself. And that comes from self-awareness. And, we look to leaders for guidance. Leaders need followers to be leaders in the first place. And, many people might even say sometimes we see that maybe what we call a crisis of leadership. And what struck me was that, when the chips are down, you look, people have a lot of people in society, there's been this emerging trend of learned helplessness, and they look to, the politicians or somebody else to solve their problems for them. And yet those people may also have their own issues going on. And so that's where I really wanted to get your perspective on this, because you've come from the really extreme, this is an extreme situation you were in compared to what the ordinary person is in. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and they said, sometimes you think you've got a bit of a tough life until you go out and meet somebody else who just tells you what they've just been through. Yeah. And then you realize your own problems are not anywhere what you thought they were. So just keep unpacking this resilience then. So this whole thing of being able to create some meaning out of what's happened, even though it's something you would never wished for, wanted for. Once you get that sense that there's a meaning there, what happens next for you? What could you suggest or advise people out there listening to this to do, or even to try and think? So how do you think this through? You go try to find meaning, then what?
Well, I'd like to build on to what you just said. I think that's an important element also to resilience, Sherry, is where the natural tendency of and part of human behavior is to kind of be in a state of expectation, or a state of waiting, where you're waiting for change to happen. You're waiting for the doctors to bring you a solution, to your infection. You're waiting for the government to recognize you the certain victim state, and I think that's become part of our habit. But at a certain point, I think that the challenge, you have to take up arms. At a certain point, you have to be the one to be the actor of and decide yourself what is good for you. And I can definitely relate with that, because and I mentioned this in my book. I say that I was in a state of little incapacity on all levels, right? And day after day after day, I was expecting the doctors to present me with a solution, to say, Karen, you're healed. You may walk out of the door, go home. Obviously, I was far from that. I mean, I was in the bed. I was almost crippled. You know, I was attached to machines, a breathing machine. I had antibiotics that was, just pouring through my veins. And it was a very sorry state to be in. And I remember each morning waking up and literally staring at the door of my hospital room. And I was literally waiting and expecting for a doctor, any doctor really, to open the door and say, Karen, we have good news. Today is the day that you'll be healed.
Yes, the magic wand was going to be waved. And
that went on for nearly 2 years before I understood that, Karen, the doctors, if they haven't found a solution after 2 years, that's a long time, 2 years being in the hospital. That means that they probably will never find the solution for you. And then I had a wake-up call, and I said, and this is where I'm coming, this is where I want to build on what you just said, Jerry, about resilience. There's another dimension of resilience, is that you have to take up arms yourself, no matter where you are in your life. And I was in no position to do it, but I had to do it because nobody was doing it for me, right? And the doctors, quote unquote, weren't doing their job. Okay, I was at the hospital. There's, they're meant to find a solution for patients, and yet this is 2 years later, and there's still no solution for me. Okay, and then I understood that, Karen, you have to find the solution yourself. And I was still at the hospital, a patient, going through rehab, still undergoing operations, and the consequences, the aftermath. And I had to, literally, I was doing my own research on finding an alternative solution to the multiple infections that were presenting in my body. And it took me about a year before I found an alternative solution. I presented it to the doctors. It wasn't easy to convince them, so I had to still convince them, which took some time, but it allowed me after 3.5 years to go home. And the point I want to bring home is that it's normal to be in a state of expectation because you don't have the solution, right? And you're expecting somebody else to bring the solution. But if you want to meet your goal, and if you want to accelerate things, if you want to come to the result that you're waiting to, hope, what people call hope, what is hope? Miracles are very rare. In a miracle, it happens once in a lifetime, right? Well, if you're not the actor of your own life and the own decisions that you take, nobody's going to do it for you. You see? And it's a sad truth. It's a sad reality, but that is, for me at least, that's a fundamental truth.
Yeah. And you mentioned the word goal. I know a lot of people out there struggle with the concept of having a goal. I guess you learned a lot about goals in your athletic career and your fitness career. Tell our listeners a bit about the importance of having something to focus on, some goal that you want to achieve in this whole journey you've been on and you're still on.
I think that our lives, especially our professions, our jobs, are oriented toward goals, action-taking goals. And if we don't have goals in our jobs and in our life, it's kind of like, and I like this quote from you, Jerry. I remember you had told us in one of your coaching sessions that, it's like hopping into a cab and saying to the cab, just take me anywhere. And if you don't have a destination in mind, which is the beginning of any destination, you have to have an end goal and end destination in mind. You're just running around in circles, and it's tiring and it's frustrating, and you get nowhere, and it's not constructive. And it's the same thing. And you don't have to be an athlete like myself to know this or to do this. I mean, this is something I worked with you. I remember, Jerry, before the attacks, I had reoriented myself on a new career path. And we had done coaching sessions together. And the idea is that you have to set a fixed goal, and more specifically, the SMART goal. So having a specific goal, in a timely way, measured, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And the moment that you have that, then you can put things into place and accelerate the arrival, right? It's kind of like you paying the taxi cab. It's like there's a difference between entering the taxi cab and just saying, just take me anywhere. That's not having a goal. Setting a goal but not having it defined is saying, okay, I'd like to go to New York, but you're not saying, okay, how you want to go to New York. Well, if you tell the taxi cab, I have to be there literally in 15 minutes, and I'll give you a $20 tip or a €50 tip, he's going to make sure you get there on time.
Yes.
So that's the whole difference between having no goal, having some goal, and having a very specific defined goal. And I can relate to that. I think anybody can relate to that in any aspect of their life, financially speaking, professionally speaking, in relationships, in anything.
Yeah. And there's we won't get into too much detail, but there are end goals and means goals, and goals tend to be, you get to New York and then you think, I like it in the US, but I'd like to see some of the wonderful nature. I want to go to one of the national parks. And so, but if you get to New York, it makes it a bit easier to get to the national parks because you're in the country. And I guess this is a way, in which people can start to think about these things. We continue our chat now with Karen, talking about how she's forging a new career as an author, speaker, and life coach. You had to come to terms with this. You had to find meaning. You had to establish a goal. You had to convince the doctors. You had to accept that the doctors were not going to be the ones. They weren't going to find this solution. It was all going to happen. You had to take it in your own hands. I think just listening to you, I'm sure a lot of people out there just find it quite inspirational. And I know that you have started in the last while, I think earlier on even, you started to go out and start speaking and talking about this. And I know you've been starting to do this more, I think, is it more professionally now recently with the book out and everything else. So tell me about how that's working for you. I saw you give a talk way back a couple of years ago, and we had to get you actually out of hospital to give the talk. And there was, I don't know, maybe 20 people in the room who just sat there riveted, because you're not one of these people just making up a few slides and just telling people how it should be. You're actually able to speak from a very deep well here. So tell us a bit about the experience now of going out and taking this message and talking to people. And what are you learning along the way from people? What do people come up and say to you when you give a talk?
Right. So yeah, it was when I was hospitalized that I understood the importance of giving talks, because it's part of the rehabilitation process. And so early on, so hospitalized, from time to time I would get out and give a talk, and the exchange is very rich for in both ways, for me, but also for the audience, because it's not every day that you come face to face with a survivor of a terrorist attack, and it's not every day that you that you meet a walking miracle, really, who's so enthused about life after being so traumatized.
No. That's true.
So, and that's something I want to share through my talks, and my book now is helping me with that. Back at the time, so when I first started with you, Jerry, I didn't have the book to present during my talks. Now I do, and it just gives extra support to my story. And I get very, very positive feedback from people. I still have people who are not capable or not ready yet to read my story, because that's how much of an impact it has. It's not always an enjoyable read. It's not a book for kiddies. It's not a night read, but it is a book that you can immediately. It's not theory. It's nothing theoretical, like you can find sometimes in the personal development sessions, or if you're looking up spirituality. This is a real life story, and you can read it from A to Z. And that's what my book is. It's A as a taxi and Z for Zaventem, at the airport. So it's not the most. It's a challenging story at times, but it's readable. And that was my goal. That was my purpose. I didn't want it to turn into anything too theoretical. I didn't want to. No. The suffering I deal with, I share a little bit with the world, with the public. But what I have to come to terms with, I do on my own. Because I don't think that anybody should have to go through that or read it as well, right? Now, the most interesting or enriching feedback I've gotten so far is from people who have told me, for example, that there's one particular lady who told me that she had lost her husband just a few years ago, and she still has not come to terms with it, no matter who she talks to, whichever therapist she sees. And she says that after listening to me and after reading my story, that she has now found a renewed sense of life and a joy in living. And that's just amazing. That's utterly amazing. I have another person who says that they've read my book. They're now on the 5th read of my book. They're reading for the 5th time. I mean, that's great feedback.
Yeah.
What could I ask more? And even myself, when I reread, I must have read the book now since probably 15 times. Each time I dive into it, I still find, things that perhaps I've forgotten, or things that, I still discover things about my story, about myself. So it's really amazing,
Right. So if anybody out there can speak a modicum of French or Dutch, I would encourage you to get the book. I want to just ask you about something else here, because what I noticed, you talk about some people aren't maybe ready to process your story and that, but you had a lot of close friends who really came and to really came and rallied behind you. I noticed there were quite a few people. How important were we talk about resources, and I know you were on your own in terms of your own dealing with the body and the issues and that, but you did have a lot of great people out there. Maybe you should give a shout out to them. Just how valuable is that to somebody dealing with something like that?
It's highly valuable. I mean, if you are no longer capable of doing things on your own, if you become physically dependent on people, then having people surround you and do things for or with you is very important, because it makes you feel human again, right? So I think you're referring to the annual race in Brussels, the 20 kilometers of Brussels, that takes place every year in May. And up until the attacks, I used to participate on an individual level. I still had my legs at the time, I still had my great lung capacity, and things have changed since. And I can no longer, I get around with crutches. So there's no way in the world, physically speaking, that I can run the race. It'd take me hours to just walk it.
No.
Anyway, so what has happened is, over the years, there's been a group of people, friends and family, that have composed a team called the Team Karen. And so they accompany me on races like this, the 20K Brussels. We also do other events together. We just get together, and it's really important, because for anybody that has to deal with trauma in their lives, it is essential that you have people that support and surround you for the emotional need, also for the physical needs that you might have, people that understand what you're going through and that are ready to take that battle with you.
Yes.
And I am lucky. Okay. I think I still feel myself unlucky for what happened to me, but in all of my unluck, I'm lucky to have had a great team that has surrounded me even to this day. So yes, I would like to shout out to the Team Karen and to thank them warm-heartedly for being there for me.
Yeah, I think, and I think a lot of people out there maybe can identify with a sense of not knowing how to maybe relate to somebody like yourself who's had such a tragic event, and we have these experiences where sometimes we don't know what to say. And I think my own personal experience of trying to become more comfortable with these things was just to allow your intuition and just allow yourself to be present, and it makes a difference if you can, because it's not, I think some people look at this and they think, oh, how would you go up and talk to somebody like this? But actually, at the end of the day, Karen, you're still very much the wonderful human being you always were, and you're dealing with this, and you're actually a joy to be around, and your friends have shown this as well over the last few years, and they come and they rally around you and they take you out and support
and
you
thank you for that,
Jerry.
Thank you for sharing that. Actually, I know that the image that I presented to the world, especially through all of the media and the broadcasting over the years, is probably a very sad image, and a very not positive. I don't want to say negative, but not positive image, where even I think I was in a state where even myself, I was frightened of myself, where I was literally in a state of pain and suffering, and I could not, bringing a smile to my face. That was just asking too much. I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders after what happened to me, what I was dealing with still on a daily basis. But today, the image that I want to show the world, and I try to show the world by being, public about my book, by being on events. I have book signing events, and I have speaking events. Is I want people to feel comfortable that there's no door between me and them. There's a bridge. I'm trying to build a bridge between me and the public and the outside world, because I would like for people to come and and feel comfortable speaking with me, and that's why I'm doing the whole thing. That's why I'm doing these book signing events. Which so yeah, people. I mean, definitely feel free to drop me a message. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. I have an account on LinkedIn. I have a Facebook page up. I also have an Instagram page up now, and I have a website. So there are loads of ways of connecting with me, and I couldn't ask for more. So I hope that's the image that that you're receiving. That I was once a victim, but I no longer want to portray that image to the world, and that I'm not myself a terrorist, so you shouldn't be afraid of me. I'm
No, that's right. And I'd like to share with our listeners in my, let's say, modest French, these two sentences from the end of your book. J'essaie de redevenir l'artiste de ma vie. La vie est un cadeau et vivre est
what
un
page is that,
art.
Jerry?
Beautiful words. Would you like to just explain that?
Because I have the
This
book
is
with me
on
as well,
page
143.
143,
Right.
142, 143.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last
I think
paragraph.
that goes back to your question or my answer on resilience. It's becoming the artist of your life again. It's being the taxi driver, and if for some reason or another you can't drive your own taxi and you have to have somebody do it for you, at least know where you're going. At least know where you want to go.
We finish with Karen sharing some advice for all of us who might occasionally feel that life is tough. Okay, so if there were three tips you would give people out there who, the last year and a half of being testing for a lot of people, I think a lot of people out there have realized the value of connectedness, the value of having some independence and freedom, and all the things that have happened around us, and at the same time, we do, like Viktor Frankl said in his famous book, you may not have a choice about what's happened or happening to you, but you have a choice of how you interpret and deal with it. So what would be like maybe 2 or 3 pieces of advice you would give people who out there might be feeling a little bit like life is giving them a bit of a hard time?
I would say number one, gratitude.
What would you say to them?
Always be grateful in life. Even be grateful for what might overcome you, trauma or accidents, because things happen beyond your control. You see, so that's how I interpret the attacks. There's no way I could have known, and there's no way I could have stopped the attacks from happening. It's beyond my control, and it's beyond the control of all the other victims that were there as well. So things happen in life, whether they're fair or unfair. That's a different question, But be grateful, because there's still things to look forward to, I think, and if it happened, you can bring meaning to your survival. So there might not be meaning to why it happened, but there's a meaning to your survival and why you're fighting why you're fighting the good fight. So be grateful, because I think that good things will happen. I believe that good things will happen to me. I'm experiencing them now with my book, with meeting people. Good things are happening, and it kind of makes up for the lost. It kind of makes up for the suffering, for the pain. It will never make up entirely, of course, but in part. So being grateful is number one. Number two, I would say, is laugh as much as you can, because life is short. Smile as much as you can. It's a wasted opportunity otherwise. And it takes less muscles to smile than it does to frown. So that right there is all the more reason to smile and to laugh.
Less muscles,
And then the third, I would say, is love and share.
As we're doing now.
The moment that you give to others, you also receive.
Yeah.
And it's been a life-changing experience for me, but it's also been a change in perception. It's been a little paradigm shift for me. What happened to me with the attacks is that before the attacks, I was somebody I would give only if I received, right? And I was expecting, if I had paid for something, I was expecting quality in return. But I've understood that sometimes in life, you have to invest in a different way. And sometimes if you give first to the universe, then you will receive. So maybe perhaps if we have another chance to do a podcast together, we could discuss the perception in life and change of perception to paradigm shift, because there's also a lot to say about that. But those are the three, to resume, those are the three: gratitude, laugh, and then love and share.
Right. Well, I may never get to do another podcast with you at all, because there might be a whole bunch of other people just lining up now to get you in there. And I would say to anybody out there who has an event coming up and is considering somebody to speak, I can absolutely guarantee you, you've heard it already here, but I can guarantee you when Karen is on stage, it'll be to the power of 10, because you really have a great presence, and you've got a fantastic story. But it's not just about, as you say, being a victim. It's about giving people hope, giving people some ways forward in which they can deal with things that life throws at them. And I've really enjoyed this. It's been fantastic. You're an inspiration to all of us, I have to say. And I'd like to thank you on behalf of the listeners for sharing that story and the insights, and to wish you a lot of luck and tremendous courage going forward in all the things that you still have. I'm pretty sure there's a whole long list of things you want to achieve, if I know you from way back, and I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen. So I'd like to wish you lots of success.
Thank you
Karen,
very much for having me, Jerry. And if the listeners do want to get in touch with me, just look me up on the LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. You'll find me. I'm there.
Yeah, and I'll put links in the show notes so everybody who wants to listen can get in touch with you. Okay, great. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. You will find details of what we covered in the show with links, etc. in the show notes. Please share your key takeaways from today's guest and let your friends and colleagues know about the podcast. Oh, and if there's a particular author or leading thinker you'd like me to interview, just get in touch and I'll do my best to get them on the show. This episode was brought to you by Wide Circle, helping you make better talent decisions. To learn more, visit widecircle.eu. That's WIDECIRCLE.eu. Until next time.